and Linda has before her the big cat, and I have behind me the divine feminine, but with biodiversity of the crops that have originated in India, a banana, the sugarcane, the rice, we are not atomized cells separated from the rest of the world. We are the breath of the trees. We are the food of the soil microorganisms. We are the water that is recycled through the planet and is 70% of the planet and 70% of us. And when other beings are living, then the relationship has to be care, not extractivism, not greed, not abuse, not robbing them of their living potential. The right relationship also means the privatization of the earth's gifts has to be stopped. No country, in no culture, was land property till colonialism. The indigenous Australians did not see this amazing continent as property and sustained over thousands of years of farming with not a bit of negative impact. And the absence of negative impact was used by Cook to say, therefore, they're not human, as if to be human means to destroy, to leave a heavy ecological footprint. That too needs correction. We have to, in the right relationship with the earth, reclaim all her commons, the commons of land, the commons of air, the commons of biodiversity and seed, which has been my life's dedication, the commons of water. Protecting the earth's gifts and regenerating the soil, the seed, the biodiversity can only be done as a commons. And I think it's fascinating how the word regeneration has come into the vocabulary all over the world. But something can be regenerated only if it is generative in the first place. Dead things cannot be brought to life. But living systems that have been desertified, destroyed, can be regenerated through loving action. We have to give up the idea that we are the masters, because so much of environmentalism is still with this idea of fixing the earth. The earth doesn't need fixing. The earth needs our humility. The earth needs our love, care, and compassion. The earth needs our awareness that we are earth beings. I think the last 500 years of destruction is because some people decided they were outside the earth, they were masters, owners, and others who were part of the earth were lesser beings. We were called primitive. I think let's become primitive again in becoming part of the earth. And every year we offer a 2-3 week course on return to earth, how to live with seed, with soil, grow enough food while regenerating the earth, solving the climate problem, so regenerating biodiversity. Our farm in Navdanya has 6 times more pollinators than the forest next door. And I know there is such an aggressive assault on agriculture, as if every kind of agriculture is harmful. But agriculture done on nature's laws, agriculture done according to the right relationship with the earth, becomes service to the earth. It is not a production system. I do not see our work in Navdanya as production. I see our work as love and care for the soil, love and care for the sea. And then the rest just happens. And so much diversity has grown beyond what we conserved. That is what a web of life is. That is what the chain of being is. And because all beings have their right, I think all systems of productivity, efficiency that have been constructed for this 100 years, 100 short years of a thinking, fossilized thinking through oil, which also fossilized our hearts and our relationships, and fossilized our hands. Because there's only one way we can relate to the earth, in the right relationship. The part of us that can give care to her is our hands. The JCBs can move the earth for destruction, but it's these loving hands that can give care. And I just had an invitation yesterday from all the people in weaving, in farming, in local vending and distribution who are losing their livelihoods for this aggressive assault of not just the continuation of the old industrialism of of production without people and more use of fossil fuels and energy slaves. But even more importantly, now the thinking to have farming without farmers, fish without the ocean. This, to me, is the ultimate violence against our fellow relatives. Anyone who says, kill all the animals, cannot be talking about the right relationship with our relatives. More people make their living as part of animal families, the pastoralists, the Maasai, the people up on the Tibetan plateau where it's too dry. It's the animals that sustain them, Ladakh, the sub-Saharan Africa. Animals are us. We are animals. And I think we've got to reclaim the right relationship, has to reclaim our earth being, our animal being, not with the bad, destructive metaphors that colonialism and industrialism created, but the metaphors of ancient wisdom, as well as the emerging knowledges of science. I did my PhD, the reason I sculpted the Einstein. I've done my PhD in the foundations of quantum theory. And quantum theory tells us that this idea of the world being made of stuff that's inert and passive, that people are passive, that worldview has lived its time. And if it's allowed to carry on a little longer, it will ensure there's extinction, not just of the human species, but all the beautiful species that are apart. But we have the other part, the right relationship of love, care, giving, sharing. We can do it, we've done it, and we can share it. So do visit the Navdanya Earth University website to find out how we can do this together across the world. And all these apartheids that were created of nature versus man, the wild versus the domesticated, all of these are men versus women, black versus white. All of these constructs have just caused a lot of harm. We now need to sow the seeds of love and seeds of compassion and seeds of abundance. That is the beauty, because the more you give, the more life grows. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Vandana Shiva, for that blast of inspirational wisdom. There's so much in there. And we want to come back and talk about your Earth democracy and the whole living democracy celebrations that you were recently a part of, and how you see the connection with that and eco-governance. So we'll say we did actually miss a little bit of going live at the top there, just with the moment of going live. So let me just reiterate what we're here for, and then we're going to bring in Linda Tucker, and we'll come back to Dr. Vandana Shiva for some more as well. This is day 2 of World Unity Week, and it is dedicated to the foundation of life of Earth. These foundations of life are inspired by eco-governance, which is the creation of Dr. Shelley Ostroff, who's here with us in the room, and Jan Golding. And Linda, of course, you will be very familiar with the inspirations of eco-governance, having their progeny really right in the spirit of what you have cultivated there in Timbavati. So it's so great to have you with us. I'd love to hear your reaction to what Dr. Vandana Shiva has just shared. And also to ask you the question, Linda, what does it mean for us to restore right relationships with the earth, and how can we go about it?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Vandana Shiva, thank you so much for taking us right into the core issues, which are the survival issues of our times. And I acknowledge behind you the goddess of earth and grains overseeing this gathering, as I invite in the white lions to participate, to share their wisdom with us as we are together, and to unify across continents. For it seems that here we have a lifetime's commitment to regenerative seed production. I know that isn't a great word for you, but a seed rejuvenation, earth healing through your work at the foundation of life, the foundation of the future, the foundation of the past. And we have with us the apex animal, whose role now has become much more clearly understood in the regenerative methodologies of nature all the way down the food chain and then all the way up. So I think it's beautiful to cross continents in this way and to have the guidance from nature right here in our global space. And to pick up from Dr. Vandana Shiva on right relationship, love, care, giving, sharing, abundance. Now, these are actually the fundamental laws of the ecosystem. And I'll share with you my project very briefly in a historical overview so that you can follow my process. And I think that'll explain more clearly how I would advise we recreate right relationship. Because as Ben introduced me earlier, I had an initiatory event in the wild with indigenous wisdom that has changed my life. And I believe humanity right now is going through a global initiation of the highest order. Life will never be the same again post-COVID. We cannot go back. We can only go forward with enlightened consciousness from what we've learned through that experience of being caged up in the way that animals have been caged up, and facing fundamental issues of our survival in a way that we've never actively done before. So I'd like to reflect on the initiatory moment and the reason why I come to this event right now with a great deal of hope and optimism. I think the starting point would be that I was presenting just a week back during World Environment Week, and here we have World Unity Week, and I'm sure Dr. Shiva would speak into the fact that unity cannot be created without us putting the environment first. So we reflect back into World Environment Week, and that takes us back to the United Nations General Assembly gathering 50 years ago, where the concept, where the first real addressing of the environmental crisis took place, and the concept of sustainable use was formalized. Now, the way that that's been used in the interim is clear indication as it led to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. It was manipulated by humanities for humanities purposes, such that sustainable came to mean how can we continue to use and abuse our planet sustainably so that we can continue to use and abuse our planet. In other words, the user and the used concept is embedded in that UN term that has to be rethought completely. And so it is encouraging to know that new policies such as eco-governance that has been carefully evolved over the years, I'm honored to be part of that process, and environmental lawyers that I've been working with as a collective have been nurturing a totally different policy document that will use the term harmonious coexistence going forward. Sustainable use cannot create harmonious coexistence with our planet or right relationship. It is based on unsound thinking. It is based on the consumptive and extractive use model. So we know, and Vandana Shiva's work and my work is based on the fact that the only sustainable way forward is ecological sustainability. None of these sustainable development goals are achievable without it being based on ecological sustainability. That the earth must come first before we make any other decisions. And that starts the relationship, the right relationship with our earth. When we move into what could be called ecocentric consciousness, where we ask Earth first, is this acceptable to you? Where we ask the lions what we're doing in terms of policy, are you blessing what we are doing by way of legislation? Then we know we are coming back into right relationships. So that word eco goes back originally to home, to family, to community. So does economy really honor our earth? We know that it is, the current economies have separated, as you say, so radically from the earth that they are no longer based on ecological economies. That can be the only way forward for us. And that is the way that I see us emerging out of this moment of the global pandemic, the global initiation, to recognize that the only way forward is when we put Earth first in a loving, caring, giving way, which is the way that the ecosystem works. So very briefly, to summarize my own development and movement towards right relationship, I had that initiatory experience in 1991, 3 decades ago. It led me to change my life completely. I had no idea of what products went into my beauty products, what animals experienced before becoming food on my plate. I didn't even think that way. But after that initiation in the wilds of Africa, a place called Timbavati, which is the ancestral site of the white lions, I couldn't live that life any longer. So I gave up happily all those trappings and recognized that I had been in a state of misery without actually knowing it, which I believe is the condition of humanity, without knowing it largely, until we come into right relationship, which is service, loving service, a great honor to be in service of nature. And what I learned from that initiation and the indigenous wisdom that was shared with me is that there are only 2 rules in engaging with nature: love and reverence. And when you engage that way, nature is family. So that was the answer that I received from the indigenous medicine woman who walked through the lions on foot, 24 lions with a baby on her back, and they didn't harm her because she said, they are my family. So that ignition event of my heart then carried me forward through the next 3 decades. The decade of that following that was investigative into understanding why were the white lions so important, why were they regarded as holy animals with a message from nature specifically for our time. And then as I went deep into investigation, simultaneously I discovered the depravity and reprehensible structures that were being set up, formalized by government, and then legalized by CITES, which was commoditizing factory farming lions to kill them. At the very same time as I was learning about the sacredness of these sentient beings, I was coming face to face with humanity's ability to create hell on earth, and so it was a profoundly depressing experience. At the end of that decade, I recognized that I had to move into action. I had to found an organization called the Global White Lion Protection Trust, and within a year or 2, I had to raise funds to rescue white lions that were in these terrible places, but they were signifying their sacredness. The one lioness that I focused on had been born in Bethlehem on Christmas Day in the year 2000 in one of these death camps to remind humanity that nature is sacred. And so my focus then over the next decade was to restore the white lions to their ancestral lands because they are site specific. And I couldn't do so because the circumstances that had made them extinct in the first place still existed. Trophy hunting still exists in this region. So then I had to start purchasing land for the lions in their ancestral homelands, now called the heartlands of the white lions. I'm giving you the background and my process so you can understand it was a process of reconnection with the earth, not only understanding the sacredness of nature, because that is the only way we can restore right relationship, but understanding the privilege of serving nature. And so that became my mission, was to serve the white lions who were extinct at the wild. And then as I started restoring them to their lands, so they started regenerating their lands. And so they started returning to the greater ecosystem. I stop there and reflect into the fact that when we go into service in the way that Vandana Shiva describes, love, care, giving, sharing, we restore the ecosystem around us, and nature, being an intelligent system, responds and gives us signs that we have been seen, we have been heard, and we are encouraged to continue with this book. What became crucial, and I think this is important for our understanding of right relationship, is that the issue of predation became absolutely crucial. Were these white lions were they able to return to the wild such that they could hunt for themselves again? And I had major criticism, working hand in hand with science and indigenous knowledge systems, which was my focus over those decades and still is. My answer to that question, will they be able to hunt, was of course they will be able to hunt and survive in the wild. This is nature. And indeed, they went much further than that. Not only did they predate naturally in the wild, but they showed the difference between predation and consumerism. And I think this is a key point that I'd love to speak into as we pick up the questions later. Predation in the wild is completely different from human-made consumerism. The one is a gifting system that restores balance all the way down the food chain, serves all of creation as one holistic web of life. The other is a system that is based on greed and taking. So the one actually gives. Predation, the lion, gives back to the whole ecosystem with a sacred governance that is the law of nature that we as humans should be listening to profoundly deeply at this critical turning point in our evolution. The other has simply been an exploitative system of extraction and giving nothing back, let alone respect and love. So that difference between nature's laws of governance and human laws needs to be radically assessed and honored and recognized, and is starting to be in ecological circles where people are recognizing that the apex animal plays a critical role in the regeneration of the whole ecosystem. Then finally, that the last decade, having come from investigation to action, it's now been expansion, recognizing that restoring the lions to the wild was the beginning of what was required. They had returned to their site-specific origins, which speaks into Ben's opening prayer, and with grandmother Jyoti's prayer for earth and for sacred sites on earth. My work then became focused on the fact that this was one of the nodal points on the planet, known by indigenous peoples to be a sacred natural site that needs to be protected at all costs. Food sovereignty, as Vandana Shiva points out, is the key to the future of humanity's survival on this planet. But equally, these sacred natural sites around the globe are nature's way of restoring the ecosystems upon which everything depends: our water, our earth, our air, all the elements. And so the sites hold codes that take us right back to the source codes of life. And the lions guard one such site, and through their regenerating of the site, feed energetic healing to other parts of the globe that are presided over by keystone animals. So to conclude, and this is perhaps where the point of intersection really takes place with my work and Dr. Shiva, is that in protecting the white lions, it became apparent that we have to protect the waters that feed the entire ecosystem. And so in doing so, we discovered that there was a plan that was approved by our government for monoculture, poisonous industrial farming right in the center of the ecosystem, a development going to take place which would have contaminated the river all the way down to into the Kruger National Park with all the critically endangered flora and fauna. And so it became apparent that that was a priority, not only for the lions, but their biodiversity. So I end on a point of a great optimism, because during the COVID period, when we all shut down, in our project, it gave us an opportunity to get really strategic and to go back to basic principles. And one of the outcomes was that we have managed to purchase that land from, there was a moment in which there was the farming consortiums hesitated and went into business rescue, and we've managed to secure that land for the ecosystem, having to pay industrial rates for millions of cubic meters of water that would have been taken out of the ecosystem for old style poisonous farming. That is the news as of 2 weeks ago. And since that purchase, critically endangered painted wolves have moved into that area and started pupping. So what I'm saying is, when we work in love, in restoring right relationship through love, care, giving, in the way that the ecosystem works, which is a gifting system, nature responds in kind. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Linda. What an inspirational story and life and journey you've been on. And some of us have had the privilege to visit you and your work in Timbavati and see with our own eyes the incredible difference that you have made through these 3 decades of transformation. So speaking into that restoration of sanctity and really the reverence for life that you have both spoken so eloquently about, I want to ask you, Dr. Shiva, about governance, because when we're talking about reestablishing right relationship with the earth, we can't get away from this thorny issue of governance and power. When we first invited you onto this panel, you immediately saw the correlation between your own work of living democracy and this emerging field and architecture of eco-governance. How can we navigate these next few critical years away from these ingrained vested interests of domination and control towards a true earth democracy where reverence for life and sanctity for all of life, as you and Linda have presenced and held up high today, is the value of the common universal human family and being ingrained into our governance and our power structures? How do we get from here to there?
So in the post-war era, it's been assumed that governance is what governments do. And then in the globalization period, as more and more wealth got concentrated and more deregulation took place, there became a tacit assumption that governance is what billionaires do. That's why I wrote my book, Oneness versus 1%, watching Mr. Bill Gates run the UN system. It began with the climate summit in Paris. I wrote the book after that. but then it's gone on with WHO, it's gone on with the FAO and the Climate Summit. So governance is the system of organizing. And I think the right relationship with the earth, at least this is my learning from the seed. I mean, if the white lion is Linda's teacher, the seed has been my teacher, but the principles are exactly the same. The seed is sacred, the lion is sacred. They are self-organized. They are self-organized in the sense that their intelligence allows them to regenerate, reproduce, and interact with other life. So the old atomistic, the Newtonian idea of separate atoms in no relationship with anything else and inert. You see, the two misconceptions are inertia and disconnection. And the reality is self-organizing, dynamic change, and interconnectedness. So self-governance begins from the smallest, from every organism. Yeah. So that's where governance begins. Therefore, it has to be with community, because that's where people can relate to each other as commons. That's where they can take responsibility and have rights flowing from responsibility, rather than the pyramid we have of rights without responsibility. Rights of grabbing, rights of taking. And then upwards, just like every cell in our body is self-organized, every microbe in the soil is self-organized, creating the ecosystem. I think the mental block that industrialism has left us with is making us not see that from the bottom up, organizing grows, and that is how life works. You know, even Schrödinger, quantum theorist, when he addressed life, he said, it's not like a machine. Machines create entropy. Life creates negative entropy. That negative entropy comes from the power to grow, to relate, to nourish. And I think we've got to start connecting in a deeper way, like I try in India, Linda tries in South Africa, the indigenous wisdom and science, because there was science there. Because the minute you saw interconnections, there's a knowledge, there's a system of knowing. And the new emerging systems from the quantum world to the new ideas of entangled life. If we take that into governance, then life becomes our teacher of how to govern ourselves. That we govern ourselves not by domination over others, but we govern ourselves by self-rule. Gandhi's idea of Swaraj, self-governance, the idea of home rule that spread around the world during the anti-colonialism fight. And I think that point that Linda made about the difference between tradition, which is living in the cycle of food, the ecological cycle, where everything is food, everything is something else's food. Our ancient Upanishads said that. Everything is food and everything is something else's food. We are the food of bacteria at the end of our lives. But being something else's food is not the source of violence. Excess is violence. Consumerism is about excess and not knowing the limits. The white lion will of course predate on another being that it needs, but it will not keep killing them. You know, it will just not keep killing every being. That forgetting of limits is where the broken relationships don't allow you to know limits. Living relationships allow you to see, no, I should not go beyond this. My relationship requires that this is the consciousness of care, of not harming that I must give. So for us, when globalization started and the WTO started and the Monsanto said the seeds are our invention and the Cargill said no one should produce food, we will dump subsidized food everywhere. That's why 80% of Africa, the richest continent, is now having to import food and everyone's going hyper around the Ukraine war. But the real issue is Africa's food sovereignty was destroyed. And that has to be reclaimed, and it's seed sovereignty. In my country, I started to save seeds. We created 150 community seed banks, and we managed to write laws that plants, animals, and seeds are not human inventions. Therefore, they are not patentable. But in Africa, I noticed they are fining indigenous people for saving their own seeds. $50,000. Yeah. This to me is the broken relationships by violence. there was a comment in the chat box about the military idea. You know, all of this violence of a militarized production of domination is really a war thinking. Then we are at war with the world and other species, but then we create instruments of domination. We just call them technology. They should be called technologies of warfare and technologies of peace. You know, just like there is predation and consumerism, there is technologies are different. You know, there isn't only one kind of technologies. There are violent technologies and non-violent technologies. And similarly, governance is not top down. Governance is from the tiniest organism outwards in a beautiful harmony. That is the missing piece right now in the contemporary understanding. Indigenous people understood it, that you don't have to engineer harmony. Harmony evolves and emerges through the right action. Beautiful. And so, you know, we do earth democracy, but more than that, when, you know, the communities I work with, and I was telling them about patenting and piracy, and they said, how can they just decide, you know, these forests and seeds are our relatives. So the idea of living democracy grew from the idea of us being in a living world where all other beings are our relatives. And they wrote postcards to the WTO to say, who are you to decide our relationships? You know, this is beyond your jurisdiction. And Michael Moore, the Director General, came to meet me. And I said, why are you meeting me? He said, we're getting so many postcards. I said, go to the villages. That is true democracy. Go and explain to the villagers why you want Monsanto to have ownership of all the seeds and how you can claim that they invented the seed. So I really feel we are at this very exciting moment of, on the one hand, extinction and collapse. And a lot of people who worry about indicators see the collapse. And I think that's where Linda's and my life is, we do the right thing. And from the right thing, we cultivate hope. And we know collapse is not inevitable. It is inevitable if we sit still. But if enough of us save the lions and the seeds, there'll be another world.
Yes. 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 Oh, that's so beautiful, Vandanaji. The lion and the seed. You know, it's so special bringing the two of you, having the two of you together. I think there could be a book in the future coming out of it. By the way, Vandana, I think you would love eco-governance. I'd love to, for you to have the chance just to really take a deep dive into it at some point. I'll bring up, before we close in a few minutes, I'll bring up Dr. Shelley Ostroff just to thank you for being with us. And she's the one that, you know, having got the vision through the White Lines and her relationship with Linda and Timbavati, has over 10 years developed. And so much of what you just shared about your profound insights and wisdom into governance are encoded in this architecture of eco-governance. I think there's something in that. So Linda, just as we close this beautiful, too brief a moment of the lion and the seed, first, congratulations to you for your win with being able to purchase those vast amounts of water. That is, we must celebrate in the journey that you're on in this struggle. There are many challenges and there are many temporary defeats, so we must celebrate the victories when they come as well. So congratulations on that. And anything you want to share, Linda, about what's your own inspiration that keeps you going and the hope that you see and the resolve that you carry, which is so steely. What would you share with those out there who are feeling maybe a bit more deflated, a bit more depressed, a bit more defeated? What is it that you would share? What words of life to close today about the hope and the determination that keeps you going and your resolve?
Well, hope, determination, and governance goes back to nature. That is where we find our solutions. And so if I were to define the importance of the White Lions over 30 years of inquiry into who they are and why they're here at this specific time, I was told they are nature's final warning and nature's greatest blessing. Final warning because we are on the point of system collapse if we do not change our human governance systems. Greatest blessing because they embody the solution. If we go back to those principles that they are showing us, a conscious nature, we have our solution in the seeds, in the lions. And why I'm so optimistic is that I know that nature is conscious, is intelligent, she is sentient, and much more than that. I know she is reclaiming her dominion. So the point that we're at right now for humanity is to raise our consciousness in awe and service of her, or to be erased. And that's the choice that faces us. For me, that's an optimistic choice.
Oh, wow. Profound. What a blessing it is to have both of you. Truly, truly, truly grateful. Just on behalf of the community, we weren't planning this, but just spontaneously, I'm going to bring Dr. Shelley Ostroff up just to thank Dr. Vandana Shiva and your dear friend, of course, Linda Tucker, for being with us on this day one, really, of the convergence, day 2 of the 99 days of peace through unity. And we're building up to Peace Week in September. And I hope Dr. Vandana Shiva and Linda Tucker, you'll join us again in September for Peace Week as we reach a crescendo of these 99 days of peace through unity, which began yesterday. But Dr. Shelley Ostroff, on behalf of all the community eco-governance, what would you like to say to Dr. Vandana Shiva and Linda Tucker?
Huge gratitude. What a blessing. Thank you so much. You're both such an inspiration. I know Linda personally. Your work, Vandana Shiva, has been extraordinary in the world, and I'm just beginning to go into it a little bit more deeply, but I know your impact. And so I just want to say that part of the key organizing principle of eco-governance is to give voice to the leaders of those who are leading eco-governance in the world, not necessarily calling it by the same name, but that's one of the key organizing principles of how do we self-organize. And I can't think of a better introduction as eco-governance births itself into the world to have both of you at the first plenary for restoring right relationship with Earth. So I so look forward to collaborating and seeing how we can serve the work that you're doing. And thank you, Ben, for enabling this and making this happen in such a good way. And blessings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vandana Ji. We know you've got much to be getting on with. We so appreciate your time. And Linda Tucker, thank you for being with us again. It's beautiful to see you, and we look forward to one day being together in person again. And thank you, Shelley, for the work you and Jan have put together to create this. Feel free to leave if you must. Friends, we're going to stay on a minute or two longer just to reflect, but those who must leave must leave. And for everybody else, you're welcome to stay just a little bit longer. Linda, that was absolutely delightful. Thank you. What a beautiful moment. I'd love to see more dialogues between you and Vandana Shiva. Very, very powerful global leaders. I did just want to share, because I didn't actually get the live stream out to begin with, so please bear with me. I'm just going to play one of the Purpose Earth videos that I will bring up. This is coming up, our beautiful, beautiful work of Purpose Earth. I'll choose a different one and let's have a look at this. 41 seconds.